Welcome back to the second edition of the Equipped podcast here on the Crosspointskc podcast. My name is Andy Bondurant. I'm a pastor, one of the pastors here at Crosspointskc. I'm the Connections pastor. I'm over all of our Connect groups, our small groups, as well as leadership initiatives. So that's why I'm here talking about leadership because I believe that you are a leader. I believe that everyone has leadership potential within them and that everyone leads. And in fact, today we're going to be talking about that subject where whether you believe it or not, you're a leader, because I believe everyone's a leader. And especially if you're a parent, you are a leader. And we're going to talk today about, I'm going to interview a friend of mine, Josiah Enyart, and we're going to talk about leading our kids well. As a parent, how do we lead well? All right, so the format for this is super simple. Here's my introduction. We're going to do an interview. I'm going to be interviewing Josiah. I'm really excited about some of the things he says. I want you to pay attention to some building blocks that he talks about. How do we get some building blocks so that we parent towards something, parent toward a goal? And then I'm going to end with 3 ways that you can lead your children well, as well as 3 tips, 3 tools, ways that also you can lead your children well. Well, thanks so much for joining me. And here, let's go to my interview with Josiah Enyart. Well, here we are. I have my friend Josiah Enyart here.
Hello.
Josiah is the husband to Bethany, father to Evelyn, Abigail, and Aaron.
Yes.
You know, I didn't realize this until I wrote all of those down, that they're all A's.
Yes.
I'm assuming you guys, this was a plan.
That was intentional. Them all being born in October was not intentional.
Okay.
But,
all right. Didn't know that either.
The A's were all intentional. Yeah.
And Aaron goes by Ace because it's
Yes.
Aaron Christopher Enyart.
That was planned.
Which
as well.
I like that.
Actually, before Evelyn was born, that was planned.
Yeah.
But
I like
we didn't
that
get
a lot.
boy first. So.
Now, we had a nickname for one of our kids. Her name it's Sophie, and her name is Bean, but nickname is Bean, but she grew out of it. What do you think? Ace gonna stay Ace?
I think he will. He was Bubba for the longest time because that was just easiest for Abby to say, and we'd call him Bubba, and then she caught on, but we haven't said Bubba in a long time. Okay. I'd say 80% of the time I'm Ace, and then if it's Aaron, then he knows.
It's the dad voice, yeah.
So Ace is I'm doing well voice. I'm doing well name. So I think he'll try and stick with that, but we'll see. Okay,
so in addition to being a husband and a father, you're also a full-time teacher, and you're not coaching baseball right now.
Not right now.
Former baseball player, college baseball player. You've coached all different levels. And all around a talented guy, I got to say this.
Thank you.
Yeah. Anytime you're always telling me awesome things that you've done. Like, I didn't know you knew how to do that. You know how to do everything. But we're here today to talk about parenting. And so tell us, how old are your kids again?
So they will be 4, 6, and 10 in October.
4, 6, and 10. Okay. So you've kind of experienced you're experiencing some of the preteen stuff.
Yes.
You experienced elementary, preschool, baby, all of that kind of stuff. So here's the first question that I have for you. So you're an educator, you're a teacher. How long have you taught school?
13 years now.
13 years, worked with kids for a long time. Mm-hmm. How has that experience shaped you as a parent, would you say?
I would say it shaped me in ways that I would have never known certain things had I not seen it through the kids and through the parents of the kids I had. Just being exposed to that many kids, that many parents, that many different systems, belief systems, but also just organization systems. Like some of them have schedules you wouldn't believe. And, then I was able to question, I like that. And I want my kid to kind of be like this kid. So what can I adopt from those people, those kids, those parents that I can then use as a parent myself? Yeah.
Now your wife also is an educator, more of the preschool. You're elementary, more of an elementary educator. She's more of a preschool, younger. Same thing, would you say, in her? And she's done differently. She's done administration as well as teaching. But
for hers, so that's where, again, like my degree was kindergarten through 6th grade, and then my master's was really supposed to focus on more adult online teaching, and paying off right now. But for her, she's focused on growth and development, and not just the educational side of it, but the psychological side and the physical growth side of it. Yeah. So from her, we've made a great team because all of the preschool routines, procedures, bedtime, how you speak with them, using sign language while talking, getting them to be verbal before they're verbal because they can point and do a lot more than we think they can. That all came from her.
Right. So let's talk about that for a second. So practically speaking, what are some of the things that you guys did with now Aaron is 4 or will be 4 soon.
He'll be 4 in October.
What are some of those like key things that you would say do this with a young child before they can talk or even as they're learning to talk, that toddler age?
Yeah, well, sign language was one she did, and it was just the basics. It was, thank you, more. And so if they were still hungry or crying, they eventually wouldn't cry. They would just do this. I'm like, oh, you want more food.
Right.
So that was really how
that's huge too.
I would have never thought that.
Yeah, and think about so our youngest, who's 12 now, I think he's the only one that we really did sign language with. And he's a big boy.
Yeah.
Likes to eat food. That was massively important for us, right? Because you lose your mind trying to figure out what your kids are.
Absolutely.
When it comes to disciplining, and we're talking about leadership, right? How do we lead our kids? Well, if you don't know what they want, how do you lead them?
Yeah. Right. And so, I'd say that one, that was really big just to help them communicate with us at an earlier age. And then we always spoke to them with adult voice. It was gentle and sweet, but we never really did baby talk to them. We figured the more vocabulary they're hearing, because they're going to understand a lot more than they can verbalize. So if they're hearing good vocabulary, good sentence structure, or just good communication between Bethany and I, they're going to be picking up on that way before we realize they're picking up on that. Okay. And I think that's why Evelyn is such a good speaker. I mean, she was when she was 3 and 4, she'd talk to people and she was tiny, but they're like, how old are you? And it's really just her vocabulary was huge because she soaked it all up.
Right.
And I think the same thing's going for Abby and Ace. So.
Right. Wow. So there's anything else that you would just say, like those early years, those formative years that you guys implemented with your kids that you're seeing dividends now? I mean, vocabulary is a very huge one,
vocabulary. Right? I'd say the bedtime routine is probably the most important thing that's affected more than just bedtime. But there was with Evelyn, first kid, we're going to bed at this time, and if we were somewhere, we had to leave to get her home for bedtime, and. But with the other two, it's kind of been like, okay, well, about this time we're going to go to bed. But the routine is the exact same every time. They get their PJs on, they brush their teeth, they brush their hair, they pick 2 books, and we sit down with each of them individually. Okay. So Abby,
how do you guys take turns, or is it like both of you together?
We let them choose, but Abby's a mama's boy, so he's always reading with Bethany. I rarely ever get to read with him. Abby is a daddy's girl, so I get to read with her most of the time. But every now and then she'll say, I want to read with mommy. And then Ace is like, but I want to read with mommy. And so then I'm just left out, which is fine, if that's what they want. Yeah. And then Evelyn's a daddy's girl, so I usually read with her.
Okay. But she's 10. You still keep that same routine with
absolutely.
her as well?
So hers is just a little later. So we'll start with Ace and Abby at the same time. And whether it's bath night or not, it's the same routine. And then when we're reading with them, after we're done and we say we have a specific prayer as well. I've got a different prayer for each kid. I think that's really important for me and my family is, Evelyn's prayer is very specific to what we want for her and what we want to ask God for every day. And then Abby's is very specific to her personality. And then Ace is very specific to his. And we end our prayer, whether they pray or we pray, we end with that prayer every single night as well. And so after we're done with Ace and Abby, then I usually go up and read with Evelyn. I think she's doing Little House on the Prairie right now, the whole series. Yeah. She's ridiculous.
So how do you, so you do 2 books with the littler kids, like practically speaking, how do you do it with Evelyn?
2 chapters.
2 chapters. Okay.
Yeah. It's usually 2 chapters, but sometimes and as they get older, they will read versus us reading. But again, on the educational side of it, the routine created the natural reading development process in them. First, they see pictures and they make stuff up, right? They have no idea what the words say. They don't even see words. They just see pictures and make it up. But then they hear you say it. So then they start repeating what you've said. So that's step 2, basically. And then on step 3, they start recognizing, oh, there's letters on there. And they start trying to read it without knowing what the letters are. Right. But now they're not just repeating you. They're also trying to act like you, do your voices. And the things they remember is incredible. And then once they start realizing every time I say the word there's a T, an H, and an E there. And every time that's, there. Okay. So then they start reading and, they're all in my mind. Well, not in my mind, according to what the district and what the state standards are well ahead of where they're supposed to be reading wise. And I think it's just because we do that every night.
there's that routine. You guys are reading 2 books every night. And it also helps that you have parents who are educators. Not necessarily that you're educators, but that you know these things.
Yeah.
And these are important to you.
Yeah.
Right?
And again, I'd say most of the...
But anyone can do that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Anyone can
absolutely.
do that. Well, let's talk about this then, because I'm kind of hearing it. But as you guys are raising your kids, do you have a philosophy in mind? In other words, an overarching goal that this is where we're headed. Evelyn's 10 years old. She'll be in middle school in a couple of years, high school soon after that, out of the house, to college or whatever life is. So overarching goal as you parent your kids.
Yeah, so it's changed over time. When it was just Evelyn for the first 4 years, I think it was really about her being well-mannered, her being educated and successful. And then as she got siblings, and we started seeing the relationship between her and the siblings, it then became, okay, we want her to be nice. Like really just be nice. If you're all these other things, great, but be kind, right?
Yeah.
And so, and we wanted her to value the relationship with her siblings and with us and with Granny and Grandpa. We wanted her to have friends that were good friends, not that we were going to go knock on doors and say, hey, you know what? I don't know about this. But, and then as she's gotten more educated and we've gotten more involved, she's gotten more involved, talking about Evelyn, with wanting to help lead worship, with reading the Bible. She has a devotional she does every day. She goes through the YouVersion app. I've realized the importance of, okay, now that we've established that the relationship of family is so important and we're going to be mad at each other, but we're going to love each other and we're always there for each other, then it now is really driven me to pray for her and strive to give her opportunities to grow with the Lord. And I want her, there's a song by, I think it's Lauren Daigle. I don't know. Okay. She's awesome, if it is her. But
if it's not, she's still awesome.
Yeah, but the words are, I find my worth in you and I find my identity in you, something like that.
Yeah.
And that's really what I want for her, because she's starting to go through that preteen stuff. She wants to wear makeup.
Oh my gosh.
She wants to dress. She looked like Phoebe from Friends the other day. She had the hair down, the little choker, and it's just like every day I want her to know that who you are is not what your friends think or what you see out there that's popular. We love you no matter what. Another thing we would always say is we love you always and forever no matter what. And so we want her to be honest and know that we're still going to love her, but that her identity comes from God. It comes from the fact that, and from family. I think that's God started, his picture of the family is through a husband and a wife in the marriage, and the family is really the root of the message of God or the viewpoint of God. And I think if the family gets destroyed, that's one of the devil's great ways of destroying society or ideals is destroy the family. And if the family is strong,
destroyed, then her relationship with God has a better chance of being destroyed. Doesn't mean it will happen, but
and so that's probably where I really put more of my focus now with her. And then as Abby and Ace get a little older and start wanting to look a certain way or act a certain way around people, continuing to push that, you are loved.
So it's really interesting. I hadn't really thought about that, but what you guys, whether there was a plan or not, there was a natural progression where it became like the basic building blocks, like we have to act a certain way to function both in our family but in society in general. And then we want you to then open up your eyes and see beyond, right? Let's see your family, right? And how do we act? And then it goes, and then once we get that in place, then it's the next building block, which is how do we connect with God? It's really interesting, and they're all interplayed, but you whether you realize it or not, you thought about it or not, you're building these blocks on top of one another.
There's definitely a natural series of events that happen outside of our control that teach us as we go, I believe, in everything we do. I mean, every experience leads to new knowledge. And so for me, that's been part of it. We do have, I would say, like an end game, an end goal where we really want them when they are adults, one, to find someone that they love that loves the Lord. We want them to have a relationship with the Lord and find their identity in that. Those are kind of the overarching goals or plans where all of those series of events have fit into. You have that goal and you're like, oh, okay, I just need to do that. Well, what does that even mean? There's 5,000 ways to get there and ways to mess it up. And it's, I know I'm not their best friend. I am their parent. And so for me, it's my job to be the bad guy at times. And it doesn't bother me at all because I know, in my mind, I'm reasoning with it that this is what's going to help them get to that point. If I just try and be their friend, I could be robbing them of a chance to get stronger and get better as a person.
Right. So that's really important then. As you're leading, right, you just establish the roles that you have, right? And it's not a friendship role, which I think sometimes we see that, sometimes more than others as parents.
Yeah.
But you define that relationship of I'm the parent, you're the child. And then that changes over the course of time. That's what I'm finding. That how that looks and shapes, it changes. Now my kids are, college, teenagers, high school, middle school. It just changes the nature of that relationship.
But you've put all that work in, and now you kind of see the fruits of your labor, right?
Sometimes I wonder, yes. But yes, basically that is true. Yeah, absolutely. Hey, so another question that I had for you, this goes back to the education side, is you teach at a very diverse school. And I think that's really interesting. And I wondered how that diversity, so it's diversity as far as race and nationality,
income level,
probably education level of the parents. How has that, watching them as parents, how has that changed how you view parenting?
Oh, I steal a lot of great ideas from them. One great thing about teaching is it's all about taking other people's ideas and molding them with what your goal is and what you're trying to accomplish. But man, I've had some amazing parents that, they're working 3 or 4 jobs just to keep food on the table, and they have the most amazing kids. Yeah. And they've really just taught them through hard work and love. And I think kids seeing that at home is big. Right. But the parents who do everything they can to be involved, those are the kids who do better. The parents who do everything they can to communicate and to say, hey, I know I can't be there and do this, but we're gonna make this happen. Right. And they hold their student accountable. They're communicating with me. They're asking questions. The more involved they are, no matter how hard it's been, those are really the things that inspire me. It's like, okay, we get busy. And I've got, who knows, soccer games and all this different stuff going on. But if I want my kid to do well, and that's really, I see that in their heart. They want their kids to have a better life than them. And I think it's every parent's goal, right?
Sure.
I want your kid should be better off than you were at that point or when they become adults. And I see that in those situations.
So the biggest key that you're seeing is involvement, right? Even though they may not be as involved as another parent can, like PTA and those kind of things, when it comes to their kid and that child's education, they're involved.
They are, and they're involved in a solely supportive and encouraging way for the kid. Right. I tell them all the time, I'm not going to give homework, and you shouldn't go home and have to worry about being your kid's academic teacher if you're sending them to school. That's the academic teacher's job. And the teacher shouldn't try to be parenting the kid. That's the parent's job. Yeah. And the parents are the first and best teachers. But if the kid's going home and the parents are like, okay, well, let's do this. And they're just like, yeah, we can. Okay, yeah, how do you want to do it? And it's fun. It's encouraging. Right. And then they're contacting me not to, hey, my kid did this, or they're involved to be supportive and encouraging, not to be dominating or forceful in any way, if that makes sense. Yeah. And so our conversations are always pleasant. I'm always talking to them about what they can do to help in a way that lets them still be the parent. Right. I think that's very important for a parent, not to try and be, coach. That's another thing with coaching. When dad gets involved, and you probably know what I'm talking about.
I know it from both sides. I know it from both sides, right?
Absolutely.
I know it as the coach, and I know it as the parent. And when I try to coach as the parent, it blows up. Yeah. And when I try to parent as the coach, it blows up. Yep. And yes, you are totally right.
And so that's what I see. They're the parents who understand that role. They trust me with that role. That's very flattering to me, but also. They have my side. They know I'm the teacher, but I know they're the parent. And so it's a mutual relationship. The closer I get to them, the better the kid does. And the more, spheres of influence around that child, the more successful that child's going to be, whether they come from low poverty or they've moved 15 times because of different reasons.
Right.
So
let's keep on the subject of education. Obviously, we are in the era of COVID. And interestingly, you are teaching from online.
Yes.
Now, are you going to the building every day, or are you teaching from home?
I am teaching from home.
Okay, so you're teaching from home, so you're probably teaching and trying to educate your kids, I'm assuming, to a certain degree, I'm just overseeing it.
Yeah, Bethany's home too. Okay. And so Abby and Ace are homeschooling. Evelyn is pretty much self-sufficient. She can run it. She's teaching her teacher things about the technology. And it helps that her and I had time to play with it before school started. Yes. But yeah, if she needs help, she can come help. She actually sits in on my math class because she has a break at that time and she likes the higher level math. But yeah, so I'm in my room hiding away and I do my virtual meetings, and then I'll do some small groups. And then once it's there on their own time, I can go down and check on the kids and use my phone. And it's it's an all day thing, but I also don't want them on the screen the whole time.
Yeah. So let's talk about this as both a parent and an educator in the era of COVID. As a parent, so many of us are online, and I know that Shawnee Mission here in the next few weeks is going to be moving to a hybrid model. But I think you'll still be online, right? Completely online?
I will be
teacher?
in my mind, the only way that's going to change is if, a study or government mandate comes out that says, you know what, everything's fine, just go back to life.
Right.
And then they're going to have us come back.
Right. But as a teacher, as an educator, so for parents who are trying to parent their children during a pandemic online, what advice do you have for that parent that is overwhelmed, at their wits' end?
Yeah.
We all get it, right? And I got to tell you, I am so thankful that my kids are older, more like Evelyn, where they're really self-educating through the teachers, right? Through the online. But, those younger kids, advice that you have.
Routines, take them outside, read with them. That's about, they shouldn't be staring at a screen in my mind. I'm a virtual teacher, but I don't believe in the virtual teaching as a successful way of educating kids. And there's statistics all over the place. Every bit of evidence we have is the virtual school doesn't work for younger than adult.
Okay.
If you're an adult, and that's really what my degree was I'm online certified to teach using a learning management system. We're using Canvas now. Yeah. But that's built for college kids or older, working parents who are trying to get a master's or a doctorate degree from home while working. And so they can do it online. But for a 8-year-old, a 6-year-old, it's just, most of the teachers have moved back to like Seesaw or Google Classroom because they're simpler, but it's still not going to be as effective as if you can get your kid outside and play and talk with them, let them socialize, and just read with them. Have those routines where you're reading. Reading infects everything else. If you become a really good reader, you become a good learner. And when you're a good learner, it doesn't matter what the topic is, you're going to find a way to solve the problem.
So what I'm hearing you say for parents out there, just as a reiteration, right, to lead effectively your child during this time is, and again, this is for the parent who's working, can't be at home, maybe has a babysitter, is like, when you are at home, let's get outside.
Yeah.
Let's do some playtime. Let's get that routine at nighttime, read to them, and I know that.
Or during the day too.
Or it's taking that break during the day. Yeah.
And that's what I think the hardest one is the parents who probably know that, but their kids in daycare or their kids home alone. Like I've got 6th graders, so they can stay home alone. I had a sad story of a dad who has 3 kids in school. Well, he's working full time. And he said they're so stressed about it that they can't even sleep at night. And he's not even going to keep them enrolled if it's going to be like that. And I was like, I support you. I wouldn't either. Your kids come first. Their mental and emotional health comes first. And if this is doing nothing but stressing them out, then they shouldn't be doing it. And as the teacher, I don't want to be stressing anyone out. My goal is to try and make it as easy, but also as effective. You don't have a job to do. But I understand the stress that it's putting on people who can't be there. So just try, I know it's probably impossible, but not to be, anxious about it or stress about it. Yeah. And if you can't do something
and if it's tearing your life apart, you got to do something.
It is. It's terrible. These poor kids.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, let me end with this last question. It's been a great discussion. Thank you so much for being on, being a part.
Thank you.
Last question is, so in September, we've been talking about love. The whole month is about love. And obviously we love our kids. But if you had one piece of advice or something that you would want to impart to parents who are watching, grandparents who are watching, how do we love our kids well? And obviously we love our children, but how does loving and leading, right? This is what it's really about, leading. Parenting is leading our children. How do those things tie together to you?
I think that then there's 2, one for each. One is the verse, we raise our kids in the fear and admonition of the Lord. And if that means everything you read about in the Bible on how Jesus took care of his disciples and his sheep was, if he needed to say something to them that was going to hurt their feelings, but it was what they needed, he's going to. Yeah. So don't try to just be the best friend. Be a parent and have that end goal. His end goal was to have them be in paradise with him forever. Right. And in order to do that, they had to follow certain rules. They had to accomplish certain things spiritually. And so we need to hold our kids accountable, even if that means we're the bad person from time to time. And then the other one is just that unconditional love in, I think about my mom. I mean, I was a terrible kid. You have no idea. I drove her insane. I don't know how she survived it. But she did, and we're best friends now. And I look back at all the things she made me do that I thought were insane at the time. Eat your food, or you're going hungry. And I ate my food.
Right.
And it turned out pretty well, and I eat lots and lots of different things now. And so I think...
But at the same time, I'm assuming you could always fall back. Even though there was discipline, there was hard things that she was making you do, you experienced that unconditional love.
Yeah, and so I knew whether, she'll say something different than what I'd say, because I know what she'd say. But for me, I never doubted for a second she loved me. I pulled a prank where I pretended I broke my arm at the pool on the phone, and it was just a joke, and then I was going to say, never mind, I'm just kidding, I just want to stay. Well, the phone died right after I told her that. So I'm trying to get her back on the line, and this was like pre-real nice cell phone.
Right, yeah.
This was a long time ago. She comes up in the car. I mean, I've never seen her drive so fast, tears streaming down her face, because she thought I had broken my arm. And I was like, Mom, I'm just kidding. And she yelled at me, and she was like, you can't do that to me. And I realized, man, she really loves me. I can't believe I did that to her. Yeah. And that was like one of those moments where, she'll look back on it and say she handled it the wrong way. I look back on it and say, that showed me how much you love me. And so, just have grace with yourself, I guess, is a good part too. Yeah. Be patient. It's a learning process. No one's perfect.
Man, that is so true. So true. Have grace, because, and it's really true. Like, I'm thinking back to my own childhood and the things that my mom never knew happened, right? And I wondered about those same things. Like, what are the stories my kids are going to tell me? Right?
Oh, man.
And kind of cringe. But then you're like, have grace, right?
Yeah.
We're doing the best we can at the time we can. Well, hey, Josiah, thank you so much for being here, being a part of the podcast, talking about parenting, how we lead our kids well. Really appreciate it. Thanks.
Thanks for having me.
All right, welcome back to the Crosspoints Church podcast. Great interview with Josiah. Thank you so much for doing that with us, Josiah. Really appreciate that. So what I want to do right now is I just want to give you last podcast, we did the top 5 list, and I realized that was a lot of things, a lot of time. So we're going to change this. We're going to addendum to top 3 things that you can do, top 3 ways for you to lead your family. And then I'm going to have 3 tips or tools that you can use for leading your family. So 3 ways to lead your family is, and we talked about this a little bit with Josiah, is have an end goal in mind. And, I talked about this. I kind of mentioned this with Josiah just as he kind of had these building blocks. I didn't really realize what my end goal was with my kids as I was leading them until we got maybe my daughter was in high school, maybe junior high. But what are you headed for? And I think it's really important as a parent to ask that question. In the end, what am I headed for? What is my goal? Is it education? Is it for them to be obedient? Is it for relationships? What is it that I have in mind when it comes to my kids now grown up, out of the house, on their own? What is it that they're going to be? And so for us, there's 2 things that we parent towards as our kids get older, and as even with our youngest, he's as we're leading him, it's number 1, we want them, each of our children, we have 4 kids. Our oldest is 20 years old, be 21 in October. We have an 18-year-old daughter. Then we have a 15-year-old son and a 12-year-old son. And so as we lead them, we want them to have a relationship with Jesus. Most importantly, we're guiding our kids toward relationship. That's our goal. Our goal is relationship. So number 1, we want them to have a relationship with Jesus. And then number 2, we want them to have relationships with our family. So we want them, when they leave the house, to feel comfortable coming back, not necessarily to live, obviously, but we want them to have relationship with us. We want them to have relationship with their siblings. And I don't know that we're perfect, but that's the goal that we have in mind. And so that changes how we discipline, that changes how we parent, that changes how we lead. So the question that I have for you is, what is the end goal that you have in mind as you lead your kids? And this may be also as how you lead your grandkids. Number two, and this is a quote that I found, and I didn't realize this. I thought this was an old-time quote, but it's something that I found from Gretchen Rubin, who is an author, blogger, and this is what she said: "Remember, the days are long, but the years are short. Remember, the days are long, but the years are short." And this obviously applies to you as a parent when you're raising young children. Think about those long days that you have raising a toddler, an infant, a preschooler, even a young elementary age kid. And then as they get older, those days aren't quite so long. But I'll tell you this, as a parent of grown adults, technically they're grown adults as well as teenagers, what I found is that even now there are moments of crisis where those days are long. There's late night talks, there's late night discussions, there's late night getting in trouble, and those moments are long, but yet the years are still short. The years fly by. And I know that I hated that time when parents would, or maybe grandparents would come and say to me, "Oh, I remember those days. Just hold on to them. Those are my favorite years." And I'd be like, "Yeah, right, whatever." But it's really true that the years fly by. It's so hard to remember that. And we can write that off as trite. But, it's important as we raise our kids to keep in mind that these days are long and they're hard, but they're so important because the years are short. Number 3 is that we need to lead through every stage differently. And what I mean by that is that as you lead an infant, as you lead a toddler, as you lead a preschooler, as you lead a young elementary, older elementary, a middle school, high school, young adult, we lead differently. And I got this idea and this thought, and I wish I would have heard it earlier, but I got it through listening to Andy Stanley and his wife, Sandra, I believe her name is Sandra, talk about raising their own children and that concept of we lead differently depending on the age. We may have to, and we talked about this with Josiah as well, that it really makes a difference, the age, because you're parenting toward an end goal. It's that building block of when they're younger, you're building toward obedience and understanding concepts of rules and following and understanding, so that when they get older, then it begins, you're building relationships and talking about how you connect with other people. And finally, it's how do we connect with Jesus? But we're building towards different things so that then there can be relationship with us as parents, because even though I'm the boss, I want to have relationship with my parent, because my kids, because I someday won't be the boss anymore. So I'll recommend that you listen to that podcast. There'll be a link to those notes in the end as well. 3 tools for leading your family. 3 tools for leading your family. Number 1 is find a mentor. Who's someone in your life, and it doesn't have to be formal, right? You don't have to have that conversation, but is there somebody in your life here at the church, in your school system, in your neighborhood who has kids who are maybe 2 or 3 steps beyond your kids that you admire and you like, I would love for my daughter, my son, my child to end up like those kids? And then just watch them. How do they go about parenting? What do their conversations look like? What are some of the rules that they have? How does it look like? And then maybe you have some of those conversations. Hey, I noticed that you did this or said that. Why? What was the reason behind that? So I definitely recommend finding somebody in your life that you can have as a mentor, someone that you look up to. Number 2 is an author. His name is Dr. Kevin Leman, and he's written tons and tons of books. He's a psychologist, but the book that I would recommend when it comes to parenting is, especially for those of you who are parents of younger children, is Have a New Kid by Friday. And he uses what is known as reality discipline. And the basic idea, the basic thought is, I want to create a responsible child, not a happy child. And that goes back to what Josiah was talking about was, I'm not parenting to be a friend. I'm parenting for an end goal in mind. I'm parenting because I'm the parent, right? So reality discipline is something like when my girls were young, they were 4, 2, 5, 3. They're 2 years apart. So they shared a bedroom at the time, and the bedroom was right outside our living room. And so my wife and I, it would be bedtime. We had a routine similar to what Josiah, maybe not quite as structured as what Josiah had, but we had a bedtime routine, and we would do the books, we'd put them to bed, and both of the girls would be at bed at the same time, and inevitably there would be some sort of fighting or crying, or one girl would do something to the other girl, and there would just be this tears and frustration. They wouldn't want to go to bed. And so reality discipline is, rather than me yelling at them and going in and spanking or whatever discipline, but it is making them feel the pain of their irresponsibility, even at 5 years old. And so we put the responsibility back on them. How we did that was, when they would have those moments, we would have them go right across the hallway, which was our bathroom. And the bathroom was a tiled bathroom. It was cold. It was sterile. We'd have the lights out, and we'd have them just sit in the bathroom. And we would tell them, you can go back to bed whenever you want, as long as you choose not to have a fit and you choose to leave your sister alone. And some days they would sit in the bathroom for 30 seconds, and some days they would sit in the bathroom for 10, 15, 20, 30 minutes. And after a while, they realized that they had agency, they had control, they had the ability, they had their own responsibility. They could be responsible and go back to bed and leave their sister alone and go to bed and be quiet, or they could sit in the bathroom. And every time that they would break that rule, we would have them go back to the bathroom. And some nights it was a fight. But after a while, they learned the reality of that I'm going to be responsible for myself. Another story is my oldest daughter, was playing the flute, and she was in upper elementary school, and she knew that if she had to practice the flute in order to get a certain grade. And I remember that this specific story in my head of when she came to us and said, I need to practice a flute or I'm not going to get a good grade. And so we said, well, okay, you can practice a flute. She says, well, I don't want to practice. And we'll say, okay, you don't have to practice. You don't have to, we're not going to make you get a good grade. And so, no, I want a good grade. Well, then practice the flute. Well, I don't want to practice the flute. And just went back and forth and back and forth. And literally she's on the ground crying and kicking her legs. And the reality was that she became responsible for herself. We didn't make her, force her to do it. We gave her the opportunity, the responsibility. What did she want out of that situation? How can you help your child be responsible for their own situation in their life? So that book is, again, Have a New Kid by Friday by Dr. Kevin Leman. Last tip that I would give to you is Mountaintop Marriages. And that's a marriage conference that not our church, but missionaries who live here in the States, they put on. And you may be wondering, you're talking about parenting. Why are you talking about marriages? Well, here's the thing that you need to know, is that my kids are not the most important thing in my life. Full stop. Let me say that again. My kids are not the most important thing in my life. The most important thing in my life is, number one, God. He comes first, and you may, well, yeah, okay, whatever. But the second is my wife. You see, when my kids in the next 8 to 10 to 15 years, they're going to be out of the house. But you know who's still going to be there is my wife. And so the relationship that I have with her is the most important thing in my life. So yes, invest in your kids. And if you want to really invest in your kids, if you're married, I know some of you who are out there listening, you're a single parent, and so you can disregard this. But if you're married, what you want to invest in first and foremost is your marriage. You know, there's a reason that the Apostle Paul used the marriage relationship as an analogy when talking about the church in Christ. Because when my child sees a healthy marriage relationship, she sees what is possible between him, her, and God. If I disrespect my wife, my wife disrespects me, what does that speak to my children? Going again, thinking about how my marriage is so important, and this idea of disrespect, the number one predictor of divorce. This is interesting. I heard this the other day on the radio, and I had to look it up to make sure it's true. But a guy named Dr. John Gottman from the University of Washington has studied literally thousands of people and done interviews and studied. And he says that if you hear this in a marriage, the number one predictor of divorce is contempt. Disrespect between a husband and a wife. And as Josiah talked about earlier, how do we help our children. And again, if you're married, if you're a single parent, you can disregard this. But I will say this, if you're a single parent, is when it comes to respect and disrespect, I grew up in a single parent home. My wife or my mother raised me. I didn't live with my dad. I would visit him a couple times, but I'll say this about my mom. She always spoke honorably of my dad, whether he deserved it or not. And I'm sure there are times that he did not deserve it, because that's just the way it is when it comes to parenting relationships, right? He didn't. She always spoke honorably of him. She never disrespected him, at least in front of me, in front of my sister. And I think that's commendable, and it helped me have a better relationship with my dad. So what does it look like in your marriage? And what is it speaking? What are the contempt, disrespect, or respect? Are you showing honor, appreciation, and respect? That's the antidote to contempt. Appreciation and respect. And I think those are really, really important things. So again, 3 tools to lead your family. 1, have a mentor. 2, books by Kevin Leman. I'll have links to that in the show notes, as well as Mountaintop Marriages. I'll also have a link to that as well. Work on your marriage. There's 3 ways that we can lead our family. Have an end goal in mind. Remember, the days are long, but the years are short. And lead through every stage differently. Thanks so much for joining the podcast this month. Look forward to being with you guys next month. Hey, follow me on Facebook at Andy Bondurant, and I'll have some questions. I would love to hear questions from you on whatever topic we'll be talking about next month. I'm not sure exactly what it's going to be for next month. I have some ideas in mind. We're talking about leading, how to equip you to be the better leader, because you are a leader.